Having inadvertently introduced Barbara Steinhaus, chair of the Department of Music at Brenau University, as a music therapist, she not only set me straight with gentleness, but then walked me through her career as singer and educator, the value of music for healing, and how visiting art museums improves our well-being. I was taken by the 4 elements of singing in a healthcare setting that align with Barbara's life as a vocal artist: the intimacy of folk music, the transformational potential of the spiritual, classical vocal style, and a sense of meaning in song and lyrics that is particularly profound for her. Here's my conversation with Barbara. Yes, I'm so happy, Barbara, that you made time to talk with me today because I'm only recently become aware of arts therapy, and then I discovered there's such thing as music therapy and that you're an expert at that. So I'm really looking forward to learning about that from you.
Well, one of the things I need to say first is that I am not a music therapist, and we'll get into what the differences are.
Okay.
So we can start the conversation and these will become apparent, or I could go right into those definitions.
Well, I always like to hear how people arrived at where they are. So if you wanted to share a bit of your story of becoming a professional singer.
Sure. Well, as a young person, I began singing in schools, church, in the community, and identified with some of the well-known American singers of my day, Dionne Warwick, Mary Travers of Peter, Paul, and Mary. And I sang with bands and folk groups. And we were telling our stories to the world and what we thought was important and meaningful. And things in America were changing, and it seemed our music was a part of that. That was very real for me as a young person. So taking music seriously as an art with that kind of human agency, I wanted to more know about it, its vocabulary, its history. And so I went through school, completed a master's of music at the University of Illinois. My professional debut was in the role of Gilda in Verdi's Rigoletto with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra here in Georgia. And it was a thrill to get that experience of expressing deep human emotions and big thoughts. So through that, it put me in the mind frame of becoming a professional classical artist at a top level, of course. But I wasn't really in a financial position or a psychological position to drop everything and move to New York or to Europe. Just doing things more locally or regionally, I sort of backed my way into teaching in higher ed as a voice teacher. For the last 17 years, I've been chair of the Department of Music at Brenau University in Gainesville, Georgia. So music and lyrics that represent the strivings for answers and express joy and such love, such sadness, and such playfulness. These works of arts just grab me, and they're very tied to the lyrics, I'll tell you. And that's kind of an important part of this discussion and my own arc. So in 2012, I lost both of my parents. My dad had been chair of anesthesia at Emory University, a large medical school in Atlanta. And so I was familiar with the medical community, but about the same time, I got some information from the University of Florida's Center for Arts and Medicine. And I went down to see what that was about, thinking, well, this might be a way I can put my respect and honor for my parents kind of together in a professional manner. When I got there that first day, they handed out colored pipe cleaners. I'm like, okay, I've sung at Carnegie Hall and I'm chair of a music department. I don't do colored pipe cleaners, Well, fortunately, Sarah, I got over myself. And in no time at all, I was drinking the Kool-Aid and really was understanding this conversation about the impact of music and wanted to learn more. So I went back to school and completed a graduate certificate in arts and medicine there at Florida and initiated a course in arts and healthcare at my university, where both fine arts students and health science majors understand more about communication, empathy, team player, negotiating non-black and white situations where there's no right answer. So it's a wonderful thing to do. And then I also began collaborations with my colleagues in health science. And this year we were very excited to have been awarded an NEA grant that I think maybe you read about. With the current climate and what has happened, the High Museum of Art in Atlanta has dedicated itself to going forward with this research project, regardless of NEA funds that may likely not be coming forth. I'm so grateful to the High Museum of Art. But what we're looking at is the impact on human growth due to visitation of an art museum. So before I get into more of that, I would say that for me personally, singing in a healthcare setting shares these 4 elements with my life as a vocal artist. It has the intimacy of folk music. It has the transformational potential of the spiritual. It has the opportunity to use classical, albeit very dynamically regulated, vocal style, and a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning.
So, to explain it better, then you study arts in healthcare and specifically the impact of music on the health of
Sure,
patients. Okay.
sure. Even though music impacts people in many different ways, the scope of practice for these various musicians found in a healthcare setting are distinct. Each uses evidence-based research to support what they're doing. Each has training protocols, and each needs that specific training. So the board-certified music therapist is using a strong background in psychology, through which their tools in music help a patient as a part of a clinical team to identify behavioral or physiological challenges. It's part of an agenda. The credentialed musical artist in resident from the degree at the University of Florida offers, not an agenda, offers a patient the opportunity to participate in a creative music artistic activity, whether passive or active, which can help them remember who they are instead of just that broken leg or just that disease. And it renews their sense of well-being and really helps them advance their sense of wellness. The clinical therapeutic musician, which is the training and work I'm doing right now, offers a caring presence and takes the very resonant vibration that we make to impact the parasympathetic system of the patient. They use the word entrainment. They're not doing that so much anymore, but the sympathetic vibrations that more and more everyone is accepting. The heart has a vibration. The tissues have a vibration. The little molecules in our body running around have vibrations. And it's entraining or getting sympathy with those different vibrations that then can impact a person positively. So does that help?
It does. It does actually. And I find it fascinating from 2 perspectives. One is, and I'll just ask you about one of them probably so we don't, sometimes I ask like multiple questions and then I forget to come back to the other one. But the 2
Yeah.
reasons I find that fascinating is one, I've been a couple of times to a sound bath where
Ooh.
they create the vibrations, and I do have physiological responses that I can feel to that sound. And they explained it as just like those vibrations can make patterns in water, and we're 80 whatever percent water, that there's certain vibrations, I guess, in certain combinations that your body physically reacts to, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
amazing. So that's one thing. There's a physiological aspect of it. And then the other aspect I find fascinating is maybe 30 or 30 plus years ago, my grandfather died of Alzheimer's before people even really knew what it was.
Right.
And I remember going to visit him. He lived in actually in North Carolina in Gastonia. So we went down to visit, and he at that point didn't recognize anybody, didn't speak. I mean, he was like he was I think it was pretty close to the end. And he was from Scotland, and my grandmother put on like an audio cassette tape of bagpipe music. Then he cried and cried and cried, and so it that that understanding of music as even more fundamental. Like he wasn't speaking anymore. He wasn't responsive verbally. It's hard to know what was going on in him, but he definitely recognized that music, and he definitely responded in such a strong way that you're like, he's still there. You can see he's still there.
Oh, what a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Oh, what a wonderful story. Yeah. And you could see how, without spending any money, his quality of life, hit the ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although we weren't sure why he was crying, but it's just it doesn't matter. Just whatever he recognized it. The fact that he recognized something that was familiar to him was so
Yeah.
reassuring. So and then so that sort of feels like music is at such a fundamental level. Like it's even more fundamental than verbal communication. It's really at the base. So those are the two things I find very, very interesting. So like our physiological response to music, and also the fact that music taps into something that's deep, 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 way deeper than the language you learn when you're a kid.
Yeah. I would recommend to you a couple of books that aren't terrible reading, not too thick and heavy, but brilliantly, Renee Fleming, an American classical soprano, internationally famous, did a series of 19 shows, podcast, I guess, and interviewed different musicians, physicians, music therapists, people who worked with sound, vibration, and music in healthcare settings. In her last podcast, she interviewed a young research doctor. She and her team were looking at using singing with cardiac rehab. And in the rehab setting, were physically impaired or something, so doing the normal rehab stuff to get the heart going wasn't an option. So they decided to try music, and at first they used just 15 minutes of music. What they found was so strong, they did it again with a 30-minute session. Well, now they're doing a huge study. What they found was that there's a one cell deep layer on the inside of human veins called the endothelium. And when you sing, its efficiency, it's sort of like it goes, you can stay in the blood, you got to go, you can stay, you got to go. So its efficiency is importantly increased by singing.
Wow.
That is so exciting. It's just marvelous. And maybe that's a part of the vibration thing. That's what they're studying to figure this all out. But it's so wonderful to know that what to me has never been an entertainment, but always my relationship with my music has always been one of more meaningfulness and purposefulness, that there is yet a deeply human meaning that's been part of my own sense of it all along, that I never knew how to explain or how to identify, but it's there. And that's so gratifying.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area to be working in. It really is. And then when you were explaining that, it made me realize too, so when it comes to measuring the physiological responses of the body, then we hook people up and we get numbers and we can calculate them and all that good stuff. When you mentioned that project at the museum, one of the things I thought was really interesting when I read the article was it's going to be looking at the impact of museum visits on people's well-being. And how we measure that is not quite as straightforward as you scored a 2, you're a 5.72, so can you explain a little bit more about the study and what that well-being, how it's going to be
Sure,
measured?
sure. Three of the capacities are much more, as you say, not tangible, and they will be done through surveys with our graduate psychology majors in pre and post surveys.
Okay.
But then our nursing majors will help with whatever wearable device we're going to have that's going to be looking at the change in pulse rate while they're going through this. And then we hope to use a device that I'm going to be new at called photo voice. While they're looking in one space, they have a little recorder and they can record for themselves what they feel is meaningful about that. And then particularly write a reflection about that. That gives us three different ways. We're going to do some physical. We're going to do some relational conversation with the surveys, pre and post, and then this self-reflection. So this is heavy in the qualitative, as you were noting. It's not got a lot of the numbers, but it will have just a little bit of that.
Yeah, no, that's I come from the field of education, so we have even fewer numbers than psychology. And psychology has even fewer numbers than, the
And
entire
yet
medical
you're a
field.
philosopher too.
No
And
measures at all.
I get that from what you're doing, just looking briefly at your background and what this podcast is all about. That really came out. My dean at the university is also a philosophy major, I love that because more academic programs are cutting philosophy programs and yet deeply thinking about subjects and looking at the human agency that's involved in the development of how we live is so important. We miss our philosophers, I think. But here you are.
I really appreciate that. I forget sometimes that that's the foundation that I do come from, right? So it's this interesting balance of trying to be, I'm not always analytical, but critical, um, recognizing that I'm in a field where there aren't many touch points. So what does it look like to establish a philosophy of vulnerability, for example? Like that would be my lifelong dream. That would be fascinating to do.
Well, I wish you well with that.
Thank you. That's great. I think that project sounds absolutely amazing. It'll be interesting to see what people do with the results too, because not only will that be so impactful for that location, that institution, but every other museum can build from that and say it gives us some extra support to go for funding because we can say we're having a measurable impact on people's lives and that if we take this away or we provide fewer opportunities, people's well-being will suffer.
Absolutely. And that brings up one other point that I didn't talk about. Of course, these are going to be done in programs where they're open and free to the public. And so one of the programs is geared more toward families. One is geared more toward older adults, and one is just geared toward really adults. But these are going to be anyone from our greater Atlanta region that comes in. There should be intergenerational contact. There should be different communities, people from different backgrounds, maybe international ways of being in the same space, taking on these artworks and reacting to them. And that builds a social cohesion. That's another part of arts in the healthcare setting that is so important in the public health sphere. And well-being certainly takes place more than not in the public space to try to advance public health, to make more cohesiveness out of people being together.
I am in no way going to get political at all, but I would want to say that this is a really good time for initiatives like that to be moving forward so that there can be demonstrated, measurable benefit that would be hard to argue with to take funding away or opportunities away from people.
Absolutely. Well, I'm right there with you, sis.
Because I'm Canadian, so I know very well. My mother always says, "Don't talk politics. Do not talk politics ever." And I'm like, "Okay, mom. Okay."
Yeah, sure, sure.
It's dangerous, yeah. But I think we agree on the benefits of the arts for enhancing human well-being, and that we'd like to try to protect and enlarge those, expand
Mhm.
them, not not reduce them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is a question I didn't put on the list, so you can make of it what you would, what you'd like. But I was curious, as a singer, as you were a performer, and then you moved away from that into a more academic career, and it sounds like you're very passionate about the work that you do, which is amazing. Is there any part of singing that you miss as far as the performance aspect?
Not at all.
Okay.
The spaces where I shared were small enough as a young person that there was a relational aspect to it that was not performance. And I like getting back to that. I was in the NICU at our hospital yesterday and humming and gesturing and trying to think about how I've been trained to use the resonance that I can create in hopes of bringing well-being to this tiny human being that's struggling. And I think that's what this voice is for, you know? And the notion, the big stage singing with the orchestra is like surfing for me, but it's not really where I'm most comfortable, and it doesn't do what's really my heart's desire. It's a little bit bigger and a little bit more out there than what suits what's important to me.
One other thing that I was thinking about is, and this is something that came up when I was talking to the woman who did art therapy, and she distinguished between art therapy and art as therapy, which is just open to everybody, and you just express yourself through any artistic medium you want. And so, if you think about music as therapy, what do you do for all of us people who don't necessarily feel very in tune or comfortable with music ability? And I will talk to people about art therapy, and they're like, "Well, I can't draw. I can't do that." And so, what would you say to people who say, "I can't sing. I can't keep a beat"?
Well, I would say first this. Human beings have done this forever. I would hardly be the first. A biblical quotation, so that the arts may be thought of as the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. And everyone can address those. And so, as someone else said, the arts really are for the process, not the product. And everyone gains from that process. I certainly, as a vocalist, I recommend everyone hum. I definitely believe in humming. And when you hum, it's not so loud and out there. If you don't think you have a pretty voice, or those that don't match pitch, you don't have to really worry, because people aren't really listening to you if you're just humming. But humming does create that vibration within the body. And so that would be the other thing I would say is hum, but don't be afraid to doodle. Don't be afraid to pick up clay and throw it at a wall. You know, get yourself involved, because it is good for us.
I love that. You had such a gentle way of saying out of tune. You said, not quite matching the pitch. Not quite matching the pitch, but that's okay. I've just recently taken up playing the bass guitar. It's only been a few weeks. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so I'm really enjoying that. But I did feel that one of the things I really like about it is, okay, when I was little, I played guitar, and so I enjoyed that, and I've tried to pick it up again, but I haven't really taken it. I haven't been able to take it up. But the bass, there's something very fundamental about the strumming, because it's the beat, and there's just four strings and the notes, and it's not all fancy like a guitar. It's just like boom, 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 and it's very
Mhm.
soothing. I find it very, very soothing.
Well, you know, something close to the lowest E on a piano, on a regular piano, I believe is the vibration that they have identified as coming from the earth.
I love this stuff because sometimes when family and other people look at me like you're a kook, because I say I go to sound bath, but I don't have the words to explain because it just sounds like I had a great experience at a sound bath. But if you could say to me that there's a note on a piano that is the same note that comes from the earth, for me that is everything.
Yeah, I'll give you another word that you can add, or term to add: neural resonant theory. That is the theory that music therapy that's moving into studying the use of vibration in a much more clinical way. And that comes out of neuroscience. And therefore, the Music and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins has been doing some of this work, and they, in connection with the Aspen Institute, have formed what they call the NeuroArts Blueprint. And Susan Mock-Salmon and her colleague have written a book called Your Brain on Art. And that's the other book I would recommend to you. It's not a heavy lift. They don't make it terribly thick reading, but they do cover the waterfront.
Was there anything else that you prepared or that you thought about as you were thinking about talking with me that we haven't talked about yet?
There is a bit. One of the things I would mention about vulnerability in the healthcare setting for the artist, that before COVID, when as an artist in residence, a professional artist in the healthcare setting, I would go sort of door to door like the door-to-door salesman, and some of the patients would not want it. But in that setting, that's a hallelujah moment because they can't say no to much over there, you know? And so for them to be able to make a choice for themselves, that's a very healthy thing too. So that's another thing that art from the professional standpoint, as opposed to the art therapist or the music therapist, any of those are clinical decisions made for the patient. And the professional artist in the healthcare setting is offering opportunities that they can say no to, which is always a positive thing for a patient.
For more information about Barbara's work as an educator, you can look her up on the Brenau University website. And for details about the study she's leading with the High Museum of Art, be sure to check out the links in the notes.